thank you to Prosper for having me here today and hosting. And I appreciate everybody who registered and is here with us today. I'm so excited that you're here and you're looking for ways to improve your financial knowledge and improve your finances. And that's what we're going to be focused on. Before I jump in, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a money and credit expert. I have been in financial education since 2013. I got my start as a credit counselor for the NFCC, that's the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. I'm also a former HUD certified housing counselor, level 3 counselor. And in those roles, working as a credit counselor and housing counselor, I have helped households create budgets, reviewed credit reports for many people. I've helped folks come up with strategies for managing and paying off debt, for buying homes, you name it, I've covered it. I'm also a financial writer. I've been writing for about 9 years, and I write for all kinds of different publications and outlets, ranging from, in the past, that's included Experian, Credit Karma, to Forbes Advisor, Yahoo Finance, and of course I write for Prosper as well. So that's a little intro to me. I'll give you an introduction to what we're going to cover here today as well. And I know one of the most commonly asked questions during webinars is, are we going to get a recording of this afterwards? And I believe the answer is yes. So just to kind of jump on that question in advance. But what are we going to cover here today? Well, this webinar is specifically about Finance 101. So we're going to kind of introduce some financial basics. And what I really want to talk about today is something that I've learned and the perspective that I've gained over my last 12 years of being a financial educator. And I'm going to distill a lot of that down for you today and talk about this idea of being at different financial levels and how you quote unquote level up, or how you move from one stage of money management into the next stage where you might be more comfortable or secure, into being able to set yourself up for the future. So we're going to talk about strategies for paying off debt. We're going to talk about how to improve your budget. I know budget is a word a lot of people don't like to talk about, but I'm going to make it really simple for everybody today. And then we're going to talk about tips for increasing the amount of money you have left over each month and saving money. So that's it, kind of in a whirlwind. I do want to make sure that I answer your questions or address any, financial topics or concerns that you have today. So I'm going to take a breath and let folks enter into the Q&A section there. Any questions that you came in with today that you're dying to get the answer to, or something you really want to make sure that I cover. That way, as much as I can incorporate your questions or your concerns into what I share today. So I'll take a moment and let you do that, see if anybody has anything. And Justin, I can't see the Q&A on my end, so just let me know.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on it.
Okay. And of course, we have, I mentioned I'll be doing a bit of Q&A at the end as time permits. And then there are also a couple of spots throughout where I will just take a pause and let folks share whatever questions have come up as we're going through this. All right. Anything so far, Justin, or should we just go ahead?
So we have one question that has come in so far, and it's, how do you balance saving money and paying off debt versus having experiences with loved ones?
Okay, so how do you balance saving money and paying off debt, like taking care of some of those things that aren't as fun, right? And having experience with loved ones? Great. You're in the right place, whoever shared that question. We're definitely going to be talking about, when is the right time to focus on which thing. And I love that you're also thinking about, making sure that you get to enjoy yourself and enjoy the people you care about. So we'll definitely make sure to hit on that.
And we have another one that has come in from Diana. Is it better to use your 401k to pay off credit card debt, or keep money in your 401k and keep paying off debt?
Great question, Diana. We'll get into that further too, but I do just want to say right off the bat that I would always caution you against taking money out of your 401k to pay off debt, because it's really expensive. There are a lot of tax penalties for doing that. And so usually it's going to end up hurting you more than it will help. But we'll kind of break that down a little bit too. Okay, well, let's go ahead and jump in here. And like I said, feel free to continue submitting your questions throughout. I want to make sure that I'm not just up here yapping, but I'm really addressing whatever comes up for you. So one of the things I want to start off with here is the idea that, a lot of people carry shame and frustration about the fact that they struggle financially, or the fact that they feel like they don't understand basic financial concepts. And it's something that I found in, counseling literally thousands of households, that a lot of times there's kind of an emotional block, or a block for people about their past experience, that just tells them, I'm never going to be good at money. I just, maybe I feel avoidant because I don't want to really have to deal with it, or I can't understand it. And I want to tell you that those things are just not true. There are very good reasons why you may feel like you're not that great with money, or maybe you might feel like a late bloomer, like you're just getting to the conversation a little bit late in life. And that's not true either. Now is always the best time to start learning and improving. And no matter where you're at, you can grow. So a few reasons why some of us bring this sort of negative experience or bad feelings into our money management. Number one, most of us have had no financial education whatsoever. And how can we be really good at something when we've never learned about it, right? According to the National Endowment for Financial Education, 82% of people who have attended at least some high school have never learned anything about personal finance in school. Studies tell us that it's actually better for us to start learning about money management in elementary school. Once we start learning how to count, right, we can start learning financial concepts about counting money and what to do with it. But most of us just never learn. Even if we go to college, we might not necessarily take any class. If you're the rare exception, I'd always love to hear from you. Feel free to drop it into the comments. But yeah, even now that a lot of states are adopting requirements for financial education, most of it is in high school, and not everyone is required to take that class in order to graduate. Another reason that many of us feel like we're really bad with money, or maybe we struggle with debt, is because of advertising. Of course, there are personal choices involved too, right? But according to a study from USC, we see as many 5,000 advertisements a day. And since I saw this stat recently, I've started noticing how many ads I'm taking in every day that I don't even realize, just as I'm scrolling, looking at my email inbox and getting newsletters and things. So we're seeing a lot of advertisements that can amount to as many as 2 million advertisements per year. And when you think about, how that might influence your spending, the influence is tremendous. Another reason that some of us feel like, man, I'm just not any good with money, or I don't really understand, or why am I not living up to maybe the standard that my parents set, is because we're in a really different environment now. Some of you may know this or feel it intuitively, but according to the Social Security Administration, in the last 25 years, median incomes have only gone up by 52%, but according to the National Association of Realtors, during that same time frame, home prices have gone up by 143%. So if you feel like, the American dream, or those basic milestones that you feel like you're supposed to be striving for, are just for some reason out of reach, there's a really good reason, and that's because incomes just have not kept up with inflation. And finally, this is something I'm going to talk more about as we go through the presentation. Misinformation is a big deal. There's a handful of studies about this, but one of the most recent I found was from daytrading.com. And according to their study, when it comes to FinTalk influencers, or people who post financial content on TikTok, somewhere around 80% of the videos they post have inaccurate information in them, and you have influencers making unqualified claims. So people who maybe have no qualification or no business teaching folks about money are actively online and sharing content and pushing products without disclosing what they're selling. So it's a tough world to be in if you want to manage your finances well. So today you're in the right place, and we're going to kind of get things set on a better track. Now, this is an expert tip, and it might seem like, oh, what does this have to do with Finance 101? But, what I've learned from working directly with literally thousands of consumers, is that a major issue when it comes to improving our finances is that we just don't know where to go for good information, and we don't quite know how to vet our sources. So I want to give you a few tips so that when you leave this webinar today, you know moving forward how to find good, reliable information about managing money. So how do you vet a financial source? The first question I always ask is, do they have any relevant credentials and or experience? If I look at, let's say somebody is posting finance content on Instagram, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm always going to go look at their bio and see, do they have any credentials related to financial education? Are they educated on money? Do they have experience working in financial services? So what you're going to want to look for if you're taking information from somebody who's talking about money management, things like budgeting, paying off debt, saving money, you're going to want to look for either they have a experience as an NFCC certified credit counselor. You're going to look for things like a CFEI, which means they're a certified financial education instructor, or they have an AFC, they're an accredited financial counselor. If you're taking investing advice, there's a different set of criteria. I personally am very qualified based on my background to give financial advice, but I am not a qualified investment advisor. So I can talk generally about investing, but I can't give you investment advice. No one should be doing that unless they are a CFP, a certified financial planner, or they have other relevant credentials, like they're a chartered financial analyst, a CFA. I should add that unless somebody is a lawyer, they really shouldn't be giving you legal advice. Unless they're a tax professional, they shouldn't be giving tax advice. I don't offer tax advice or legal advice. We all have our limitations, right? The next thing I would say that's important to look for as you're learning where else can I go for financial information is compare your sources. So let's say you do find somebody who's an influencer who you like, and you want to know, are they giving me good, reliable information? Check between different sources. I always recommend going to .gov sites. The CFPB has a great website, the Federal Trade Commission, there's investor.gov. I'm blanking, I'll come up with it in a second. studentaid.ed.gov for student loan questions. So check between sources and make sure that you have multiple reliable sources giving you the same information. And then finally, are they speaking to people in your position? This is one of the most damaging things that I see happening online, is that you have, quote unquote, finance gurus, people who've been doing this for a really long time. Some of the most popular voices in my field are speaking to people who are in a very specific financial position. And if you take their advice, it can actually do more harm than good. I'll give you an example. This is kind of an extreme one, but people who are encouraging crypto investing, if you don't have an emergency savings or you have a lot of credit card debt, investing in crypto can really put you in a worse financial position, because let's say you have an emergency or you realize, I got to pay off my credit card debt, and you need to sell that crypto. You might be selling it at a big loss. And we've seen people lose everything through crypto investing. So it's important to find somebody who is speaking directly to the financial situation that you're in. And I like to break it down into three levels of money management. And I want to help you understand how to recognize which level you're at so that you know if someone is really speaking to you. So over the years, I've kind of developed this concept for money management. And like I said, I think it's really important to understand where you're at right now in order to figure out what are my next steps to help me grow. And like I said in the last slide, also understanding when I find resources, when I find influencers or educators, are they speaking to me? If not, you got to find somebody else right now. So what level are you at financially? I would break it down into three distinct levels. And even if you can't remember my names for them, that's okay. I call them survival, stability, and satisfaction. You can think about it as if they're where you're focused at in time. So if you're in the survival level or the survival stage, your focus is on yesterday. And what does that mean? That means that your focus is on earning money in order to pay for the purchases that you made yesterday or a month ago or years ago, right? People who are in the survival stage are focusing on, often it's paying off debt, or, paying off specifically credit cards and high interest loans, anything above about 6% interest. If you are carrying that debt from month to month, like credit card debt, I would say that you're probably in the survival level. And a lot of people who are here, one of their main struggles is that their expenses exceed their income. So as we go through the presentation, I'll talk about how do you move out of that level into the next level. So the next level is stability. People who are at this level, the focus is on earning money to cover my expenses today. You might call it living paycheck to paycheck, right? So maybe you get a paycheck coming in and you want to be able to enjoy that and celebrate and do something fun. But once that money hits, you already know what it's going towards. You know that maybe you have a car payment coming up in a couple of days or cell phone bill. And so the money is already kind of assigned as soon as it comes in. And the main challenge at this stage is your expenses are generally equal to your income and you just feel like there's no room to breathe, right? Then we move into the third stage, which is satisfaction or level, where your focus is on your future. So let's say you don't have any high interest debt, you've saved for emergencies, and now you're using any surplus that you have each month to save for future expenses like retirement or vacations that you want to take, things of that nature. Right. So how do you move up a level, right? Maybe you're in the survival stage and you want to know, all right, how do I get to the next place where I feel more stable and I don't feel like I'm always just kind of running to catch up with my bills and debt payments and things like that? The answer is that you want to focus on using your surplus for the right priority. What's a surplus? A surplus is the money that you have left over each month after you cover necessities. So let's say your income comes in, you cover all of your bills, and you've got $200 left for the month to do whatever you want with it. We're going to talk about, depending on which level of money management you're at, what should you do with that money, not only to help you have more stability, but help you move to that next level where you've got more freedom and more comfort. I'll take a pause there and see if anybody has any new questions that they want to share.
There is one question coming from Isis. How can I start preparing for retirement? What should be in place by then, such as life insurance, etc.?
Okay, yeah, good question. So what we want to think about is, as we go through these levels, making sure that you have crossed off some of the steps that are important to cover before you start saving for retirement. So that when you're putting money into your retirement savings, you're not tempted to withdraw it. And like I said before, end up with some really massive penalties. So we'll kind of go through what those levels are and what you need to do before you can start really actively saving a lot of money for retirement. Yeah, that's a great question. I could get a little bit more into it, but I think it's a big enough question that we might not be able to go too much more in depth into that right now. But we do have a couple of more webinars coming up, and I'll share some resources with you as we go through this too. Anybody else got questions right away?
That's all for now.
Okay. So let's talk about being at that first level of money management, which I've called survival, right? So we're focusing on just covering the expenses that came up yesterday. What do you need to do in order to move through this stage? Well, when you're in this stage of money management, the main priority for your surplus, again, that's any extra money you have left over each month after covering all of your expenses, is you're going to want to focus on eliminating high interest debt. That's got to be the main priority. High interest debt is any account that has interest above 6% APR. So we're thinking about things like credit cards. We're thinking about things like payday loans if you have them, or cash advances. Right now, the average interest rate on credit cards is just above 21%. So why is this so important? Well, when you ask about things like preparing for retirement, when you put money into retirement accounts, what you can generally expect to earn is somewhere between 6% and 8% returns every year. By comparison, if you're carrying credit card debt from month to month, meaning you're not paying off the full balance, you're probably looking at interest charges around 21%. And a lot of people don't realize how important interest is when it comes to making financial decisions. But if we compare those two, if you're saying, okay, I've got credit card debt, but I also want to save for my retirement, it's really, it's well intended, but it really is a mistake to think that, okay, I'm going to choose retirement over paying off my credit card debt, because that retirement investment is only going to get you, on average, historically speaking, we're expecting around 6 to 8% returns, whereas the credit card debt is costing you 21% interest. With newer credit cards, interest rates are up to almost 30%. So you're really not getting a payoff. In fact, you're losing money, and we'll look at some comparisons in a minute, but you're going to be losing money if you choose to invest in retirement before paying off credit cards and other high interest debt. Just to give you a sense of how much it costs to carry credit card debt. So if you carry a balance from month to month, you do receive interest charges unless you have a special promotional card. But if we look at the average credit card, according to TransUnion, the average amount that people with credit cards owe is $6,500. So if we just look at the average card with the average interest rate around 20%, what is it going to take to pay that off? Now, I ran some calculations. If you pay $100 a month on that credit card, you will never pay off the debt, because the interest charges that you accrue are accumulating faster at a higher rate than what you're paying each month. Now, let's say on that same credit card debt, you pay $150 each month. It would take you nearly 7 years to pay that debt off. And in terms of the total interest that you'd pay, it's almost equal to what your balance initially was, right? So you're spending years just paying off interest. So that's really why, a lot of people don't know, because they've never learned to look at interest rates, that when it comes to credit card debt, it is really the enemy of improving your finances. So that's how we're going to talk about moving from survival to stability. It's really focusing on paying off high interest debt. How do you do that? Well, it's much easier said than done. But I want to give you a few tips for strategies that you can use to pay off your debt. Let me just take a drink of water. All right. So when you're focusing on eliminating high interest debt, there's a few ways that you can go about doing that. If you have a monthly surplus that you can put towards your debt payments, you want to think about potentially using one of these first two methods. So we have the debt avalanche and the debt snowball method. Both of these methods involve self-guided debt payoff, so it's without any outside help or without any new loans or anything like that. But they have to do with strategizing to make sure that you are prioritizing certain debts that you have in order to accomplish a goal with your payoff. So debt avalanche versus debt snowball, what's the difference? The way I like to remember it is that an avalanche is bigger. So with the debt avalanche method, we're focusing on the accounts with the bigger interest rates or the higher interest rates. What does that mean? So with either of these methods, what you're going to do is you're going to pay the minimum payment due each month, right? But then you're going to choose a debt to prioritize paying off first. And once you pay off that account, then you're going to roll over the money that you're using for that account into the account that is your next highest priority. Kind of a wonky explanation, but I'm hoping that makes sense. You guys can let me know if you need me to clarify that again. So with the debt avalanche method, you're paying minimum balance on all of your debts, but you're choosing the debt with the highest interest rate to pay your extra monthly surplus towards. So going back to that idea of having a $200 monthly surplus, you're going to pay that towards the debt that you have that has the highest interest rate. So you're going to be paying that extra money each month, right? And you're going to end up paying it off earlier than than you would have otherwise. Once you pay off that debt with the highest interest rate, you're going to take the money that you're paying towards that account and roll it towards the account with the next highest interest rate. And then you're going to kind of keep going in that pattern until all of your debt is paid off. With the debt snowball method, similar concept, but it's a little bit different. You're going to focus on paying off the account with the lowest balance first. Why would you do that? It doesn't save you as much money as the debt avalanche method, because that one's knocking out high interest charges first. But with the debt snowball method, what studies show is that people tend to stay more motivated to pay off all of their debt, because when you're paying off smaller accounts first, you're kind of seeing wins happen quicker. So you're going to see yourself eliminate an account faster, and people just tend to stay more motivated by that, and they're more likely to follow through and pay off all of their debt as opposed to giving up or looking for a different solution. So those are some of the self-guided solutions. You can also look for help, or you can look for financial products that will help you. If you have high interest debt, another great way to go is to look for a consolidation loan. You do need to have pretty good credit scores in order to qualify for a new loan. We're usually talking somewhere in the mid to, to near mid 600s in order to qualify. But a consolidation loan is simply a personal loan that you take out, and you can use that to pay off any of your other debt, right? So if you have credit cards with 20% interest rates, 30% interest rates, and you take out a debt consolidation loan, and maybe the interest rate is 10%, you use that to pay off your credit cards, and now you have you've benefited from potentially consolidating multiple accounts into one new debt account, but you're also benefiting because you've reduced the interest charges that you're going to be paying. Another way that you can get help with paying off high interest debt or other debts is by reaching out to a NFCC certified credit counseling agency. So you can search for member agencies at nfcc.org, and you can potentially meet with a counselor in person or by Zoom or over the phone to go over the full details of your financial situation. And your credit counselor can help you come up with a personalized strategy. And they can also help you look at options that aren't available elsewhere, like debt management plans. And those are plans where the counseling agency works with your creditors to consolidate all of your payments and potentially even reduce what you have to pay each month, or forgive old fees, reduce your interest rates, and help you pay off your debt sooner. So those are some of the best options that I recommend.
And Sarah, before we move on, we do have a quick question from Caitlin. She asks, would you suggest that while you're paying off that one account, that you only are making the minimum payments to the other accounts?
Yep, Caitlin, that is exactly correct. So that's with either the debt avalanche or the debt snowball method. That's the whole strategy, is that you're paying just the minimum that's due on all of your accounts except one, and it's whichever one has the highest priority for you. So with debt avalanche method, you're just paying extra towards the one with the highest interest rate until it's gone. And with the debt snowball method, you're just paying extra towards the one with the lowest balance. Anybody else?
That's all for now.
Okay, great. So now let's talk about that second level, which I call stability. So we're focusing on, or let me rephrase, in this phase, you're going to be in a position where maybe you're no longer, worrying about paying off expenses that you've made in the past or purchases, but you're focusing on, moving from covering expenses that you know are going to come up to building a bigger financial safety net underneath yourself. So what do you do when you're in this stage? Let's say you've paid off your high interest debt and now you're here and you're going, okay, I've built up a surplus each month. What do I do with it? How do I move to the next phase? In the stability phase, what you really want to focus on is building your emergency savings. This is a savings fund that is going to be there for you when you have a genuine emergency. So we're talking about things like getting laid off, maybe having your hours severely reduced at work, Things like, unexpected medical expenses, maybe a car repair. If you've got a vehicle that you rely on for work, that can be an emergency. Maybe it's, a last minute flight to go see a family member who's ailing, things like that. So this is the phase where you're really going to think about starting to build a financial safety net underneath yourself by saving money. So an emergency savings account, how much do you need? Where should the money go? Experts like myself typically recommend saving somewhere between 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses. Why that figure or why that range? Because that's going to allow you, when you don't have any income at all, worst case scenario, to be able to cover all of your expenses for a period of several months until you can find a new job, let's say, right? Or you can find another source of income. It's a big range, right? So if you're wondering, where do I fall? Should I save 3 months worth of living expenses or 6 months? The way I would recommend deciding that is if you have stable income, if you work in a field where it's high demand, so you know that if you lost your job, you could probably find one pretty quickly. And if you don't have any dependents, I would lean more towards the 3 month mark. If you have seasonal work, if you're self-employed and your income fluctuates a lot, if you have dependents, we're leaning more towards the 6 month mark. Now, those can be big figures, right, that we're aiming for. That doesn't mean you shouldn't save any money if you feel like you can't get to that goal within the next 2 or 3 years. What you want to do is just start working on it. See any amount that you save as a gain, right? It's exciting if you can just save $100 or a few $100s. What I recommend setting up as your first goal is save an amount equivalent to your rent or your mortgage payment, and then grow from there. How do you do that? You want to, the best way you can do it, it's proven, is by setting up automatic deposits from each of your paychecks into a savings account. Instead of having your full paycheck deposited to checking, where you might be tempted to spend it, have some of it go directly into a savings account. So it's there in your savings before you even think to spend it, right? Where should you put that money? It can go into a regular savings account, but we're talking today about the importance of interest rates. We really want to make sure that you're earning interest on that and you're beating inflation, which is around 3% a year. So what I would recommend is looking for a high yield savings account or a HISA, where you're maybe earning somewhere more around 4% interest a year. Those rates might, fluctuate over time, but you want to make sure that you're earning something for the money that you're setting aside. It looks like a couple of questions just came in, so I'll take a pause.
Yes, we have two new questions that have come in. The first one is, I have built up a pretty solid emergency fund, more than 6 months of expenses, but I also have credit card debt. Is it smarter to use some of that money from my emergency fund to pay off the debt or do a consolidation loan?
Great question. So you're saying you have, just to make sure I got that right, it's more than 6 months or roughly 6 months worth of living expenses in your savings, but you also have credit card debt. And the last part was, is it smarter to do what?
To use some of the money from the emergency fund to help pay off that debt or do
Yeah.
something like a debt consolidation loan?
Yeah, I mean, both of those can be great options, but I would definitely say if you are carrying credit card debt, you probably have too much money in your emergency savings. It might sound a little counterintuitive to say that you have too much money in savings, but there is such a thing as that, especially if it's costing you. So I'm going to guess that you're earning anywhere from, 0.01% to 4% interest on your savings if it's in a bank account. And meanwhile, the credit card debt is costing you somewhere around 20% interest, maybe a little bit lower if you're lucky. So absolutely, I would recommend thinking about putting some of that money towards debt payoff. A consolidation loan can help. It can help speed up the process of paying off debt by reducing your interest charges. But what's going to end up happening is, if you use like a debt payoff calculator, you can compare what you're earning on your savings versus what you're losing with those credit cards, and you're going to see that the strategy you're using right now is costing you money. So definitely recommend focusing on using those funds to pay off credit cards. I think there was one other question.
Yes, there's one more. And it's, would a 401k qualify as a savings or emergency fund?
Great question. A 401k definitely does not qualify as an emergency fund. I'm glad you asked that because it's something that's, I want to make sure everyone's clear about. Your emergency savings should only go into an account where you can withdraw it for an emergency at any time without a penalty. And that's just not the case for retirement savings. Your retirement account is a form of a savings account, but it's also, the money is also being invested. So you're going to have higher interest rates. But the catch with retirement accounts is that you're going to be looking at major penalties for early withdrawals before you reach the age for distribution. Offhand, I think it's 10% penalty. So you'll automatically forfeit 10% of what you withdraw. And then in most cases, what you withdraw will be considered income. So you'll be charged income taxes on the amount that you withdraw as well. So we're looking at massive penalties for withdrawing from a retirement account. I would not recommend putting any money into retirement, with very few exceptions, until you have paid off the credit card debt. Very good questions. So once you have this figure, oops, let's go back. Once you have around 3 to 6 months worth of savings for your living expenses, where does your money go next? Well, if you have any expenses that you know are coming up in the next couple of years, I would recommend saving money for what we call a sinking fund. So that's money that you know you're going to sink, quote, into an expected cost. So those are things like planning a wedding. You know that you're going to be getting married in the next couple of years. Instead of setting yourself up to withdraw from your emergency savings to pay for that wedding, you don't want to tempt yourself to do that. You want to start saving separately for the expenses that you know you're going to have. Sinking funds can also be great for things like saving up for a down payment on a car, saving money for a vacation. Someone was asking about, how do I make sure that I'm still enjoying time with my family? When you're in the survival level, that first level, I would really recommend thinking about doing free activities with your family. It could be anything from going to the library and renting media, or taking walks or bike rides together, hikes, things like that. Once you get into this stage, what you want to start thinking about is, okay, maybe I do want to go on a vacation with my family, but I'm not just going to go and kind of spend whatever I spend. I'm going to really have a plan for money that I have saved for this vacation. Where does that money go? I recommend, again, a high yield savings account, or HISA. If you know that you're not going to touch it, I recommend looking for a CD with a higher, more competitive interest rate. You might find something around 4%, maybe 5% right now. So I wouldn't do CDs, again, for money that you're setting aside for emergencies, because you're going to get a penalty if you withdraw money from a CD early. Another great option is treasury bills or T-bills. One of the benefits they have over CDs is that, oh my goodness, you're going to have to double check me on this, but I believe you don't pay any state income taxes on the interest, while with CDs you pay state and federal income tax on the interest. We're a few minutes behind here, so I'm going to keep it pushing. All right, so now we're talking about that third level, and a few of you have been asking questions about this, where we're in the satisfaction mode. We're starting to think about, how am I going to set myself up for a more comfortable future, right? And at this stage, what you really want to prioritize is, instead of spending whatever extra money you have to celebrate all the time, or go on vacations, or buy clothes, you could still do those things, right? But you want to make sure that you have a monthly deposit going into your retirement. Excuse me, I should say, from every paycheck, you want to make sure that you have part or all of your surplus going into a retirement account. Where should the money go? Well, for most of us, I shouldn't include myself because I'm self-employed, but for most people, it's going to go into a retirement account that's provided by your employer. So let's say a 401k or a 403b. I highly recommend, if you have paid off all of your high interest debt, and you have saved for emergencies or upcoming expenses, that you're really going to want to prioritize putting money into your retirement accounts from every paycheck. Even more so if you have an employer match. So many people do. An employer match means that your employer has a policy where they will match a certain amount of your contribution up to a percentage of your, usually it's a percentage of your income. So they'll do like up to 3% of each of what you earn from each paycheck. They will match you up to that dollar amount. A lot of people overlook the fact that an employer match means free money, which is something you don't get anywhere else, really. So it's really important to take advantage of that. And then what you want to think about when you're here too is setting yourself up so you might have multiple income streams in the future. You're thinking about things like maybe investing in real estate. Another thing I didn't add here, but this is the phase where you really want to start thinking about paying extra on your lower interest debts. So maybe you have a mortgage, maybe you have a federal student loan. This is where you want to start thinking about, okay, I'm in a position now where I can put part of my surplus to eliminate debt that has lower interest rates. Right. So to summarize, how do you level up, right? If you're in the survival mode, what you want to do is your focus should always be eliminating debt with interest rates that are above 6%. And the goal here is to get to a point where you're paying off credit cards and other high interest debt every month. If you're in the stability phase, what you want to focus on is building that emergency savings fund for yourself and creating sinking funds for expenses that you have in the next 1 to 2 years. And then if you're in that satisfaction phase, you want to think about saving for retirement and other long-term goals. It's okay to start putting money into places where you're going to get significant penalties for withdrawal because you won't need to. You'll have your emergency savings to fall back on, right? And then in the satisfaction phase, I didn't list it here, but you're going to start thinking about paying extra towards those long-term lower interest debts like mortgages and federal student loans. So why is it urgent to get started now and to sort of follow these steps that I'm outlining? A lot of people get them in reverse. It sounds like a few folks have shared concerns about that, investing in retirement, but not paying off debt yet, or having no savings. I want to just kind of give you a representation here of why it's really urgent to get these things in the right order and to start as soon as you can. Start today if you haven't started yet. So let's go back to that example we were looking at of high interest debt. So this is the same example we were looking at before. We've got the average amount owed on credit cards, the average interest rate, and we're looking at if you pay just $150 a month, we've got a really long payoff ahead of us, almost 7 years, and we're nearly doubling what we owe in terms of interest charges. By comparison, if you're putting money into a 401k, you're looking at an average return of, as I said earlier, 6 to 8% a year, let's say 7%. If you were to contribute that same amount that you were putting towards debt payoff, towards a 401k, you are not going to get returns that outpace what you're paying towards your debt payments. So if you compare, this isn't a total apples to apples comparison, but if you compare up in that top table, your total interest charges that you accrue over 6 years and 10 months versus what you would earn by investing the same amount into a 401k, you're not earning anywhere near what you're having to pay on your debt, right? So that's why we really want to prioritize paying off debt before we're investing for the long term. But what I also want to point out here is if you look at that table at the bottom, you see an example of why it's really valuable to get to a point where you can start investing in retirement accounts and investing for the long term right away. You can see that if you contribute just $150 a month to an account that's earning an average of 7%, you're looking at returns over a course of 6 years of just over 3,000. But after 15 years, you're looking at returns over 24,000. Now your balance is going to be higher than that because I didn't add what you have personally contributed. This is just what you're earning on the accounts, right? And over 30 years, you're looking at returns of over 160,000. So this is one of the reasons why I especially love being able to talk to people who are, maybe in their really early career and help them understand that you are going to be setting yourself up to be in a great position to retire, potentially retire early, if you just even start saving a little bit for retirement right now. If you're close to retirement, it doesn't mean that you should give up. It's always a good time to get started. It's just that, we don't have time to get into it today, but your strategy would shift a little bit. But it still is important to start saving for retirement at any age. All righty, let's see. So let's say you're listening to me and you're going, this is all well and good, Sarah, but I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I don't have any extra money to help me pay off my credit card debt. Or, wow, I would really love to save money for emergencies, but, I'm looking at these figures. It's going to take me 5 years to save 3 months worth of my living expenses. So how do you speed up the process, right? If you go to most financial influencers or folks online, gurus, coaches, they're always going to focus on cutting your budget. That's almost always the focus is cut, cut, cut. But that's not the way I like to encourage people to do this. It is one tool that you have in your toolbox. Or think about it like driving a car. It's like you can hit the brake, right? And so cutting your budget is like hitting the brakes, right? So you just keep hitting the brakes and going, no, I'm not going to spend on this and that and this and that. If your income is limited, however, cuts can only take you so far, right? The goal isn't to just keep living on less and less and less, right? That's not a way to enjoy your life. What I also like to encourage people to think about is that you can press the gas too, by which I mean, think about finding ways to earn more income. So both of these are important tools for helping you increase the surplus, increase the amount of money you have left over each month. I mentioned before that the inflation rate right now averages around 3% a year, right? So if your income is not increasing by at least 3% a year, then you can think of it as if you're actually losing money. You're losing spending power. Your money is not going to go as far each year. So one of the best pieces of financial advice I can give that I really don't hear a lot of other people giving is set yourself up always to think about how can I make sure that my income is growing every single year, whether it's through a pay increase at your job, maybe it's through looking for a promotion, talking to your boss about how to position yourself for a promotion. Maybe it's through looking around for a new role at a different company. I should have pulled up studies on this, but last time I looked, which was a couple of years ago, a lot of people saw a much bigger growth in their income by switching to a new employer versus staying with the same employer and looking for a promotion. Of course, you don't want to be looking for a new job every year, but it's just a mindset shift that I think can help people a lot and really get you out of this sort of scarcity mindset where you're just trying to live off of less and less and less. So let's talk about budgeting. It's the B word of personal finance, right? And I find that when I bring up this word, a lot of people don't like talking about it. It makes them nervous. So if you're feeling nervous, take a sigh. It's okay. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. I will say again, counseled thousands of households. I've probably met with, in my memory, maybe 5 people who came in to meet with me as a credit counselor or a financial counselor who already had a budget in place. So if you're not doing this, don't let yourself be tricked into thinking you're the only one. Most people don't have budgets. You can really get a leg up over other folks, so to speak, if you do have a budget. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be rocket scientist. The way I like to define what a budget, rocket scientist, rocket science. The way I like to define what a budget is it's simply a list where you compare 2 things. You compare your income to your expenses, and you have one main goal to make sure that your income exceeds your expenses, right? Oh, let me see. What do my notes say here? So a couple of things that that you can keep in mind as you're trying to put together a budget. You can just start with a list. You can just start writing it down on a piece of paper. I recommend maybe doing like an Excel sheet or a Google spreadsheet, but you can even just use a regular document, and start making a list of all of your expenses. Make sure you include your necessities. That's going to be your housing expense, food, medical costs, transportation if you use a car to help you earn income getting to and from work, and your utilities, which includes phone and Wi-Fi, because for many of those things are necessities in order to help us earn income or increase our income. So you want to make sure you include all of those things. You want to make sure you include your other expenses that you have each month that come along with them. So let's say things like car insurance, gas, and you want to think about one-off expenses that you have throughout the year. The best way to include them in your budget, in my opinion, is to take the total annual expense and divide it by 12 to put it into a monthly budget. That way you can make sure that your income each month averages out to be enough to cover all of your annual expenses. If you're not sure what to include, or you're afraid you might overlook expenses, shoot, I recommend this for anyone who's working on a budget. Make sure that you look at your last 3 months worth of bank statements and credit card statements to make sure you're not missing anything. So how do you make changes? You're looking over your budget. Let's say you've created a list of all of your income and expenses, and money's just too tight. You want to free up extra cash maybe to pay off your debt faster or save more money for emergencies. I like to, instead of just thinking about, again, what can I cut? When it comes to cutting back on expenses, I like to use this sort of exercise here. So instead of just thinking, oh, I can never have fun again ever, I want you to start thinking about what can I cut, not just permanently, but maybe there are things I can cut temporarily, that are just going to help me save a little bit extra. Maybe I, put my gym membership on pause for a while because I'm not really using it. So think about not just what you can cut permanently, but what you can cut temporarily. And then don't just think about what you can cut out completely by eliminating it, but also consider what can I reduce? So you can use a chart like this. It's something that I use with folks that helps us think a little bit more creatively about where you can make reductions, and then sort of go through some of those expenses and go, okay, you know what? Maybe I don't want to stop giving holiday gifts or birthday gifts altogether, but maybe I'm just going to eliminate them temporarily. So you're going to put them in that top right hand corner. Or maybe, okay, I can go without a vacation for the next couple of years. So this is a tool that you can use if you want to take a screenshot or whatever. Very simple. Just to start writing things out and getting those creative juices flowing, so to speak, about where you can cut back. I also think it's important to look for ways that you might need to increase. If you're somebody who has been in a state of feeling really tight about your finances for a long time, look for ways that you can do affordable things that give you a sense of enjoyment. Because if you don't, you will probably burn out and start racking up credit card debt. Maybe you'll get impulsive and go on shopping sprees or things like that. So think about, what are fun things that I can do? Maybe I'm planning game nights with friends occasionally, and, we're doing a potluck style. So we're each spending $20 as opposed to going out to the movies or going to a concert or going out to an expensive dinner. Right. So it can take a little bit of planning, but there are different ways to cut back. And I think it also helps to communicate to friends and family that this is what I'm working on, and I'd love for you to participate with me. So that was a lot fast, and we're reaching the end of our time here. But just to kind of summarize what we covered, we talked about why is it so hard to manage money? For most of us, it's due to a lack of education about really basic financial concepts and a lot of misinformation being out there, whether it's, on social media or otherwise. How can you level up? So how can you move to the next level of security and safety or even financial satisfaction by using your surplus for the right priority? So number one, paying off high interest debt. Number two, saving for emergencies. And then we're talking about eventually putting ourselves in a position to save for long-term goals like retirement. Okay. And how can you speed up the process? Well, there are two ways to do that. You can do it by earning more income and or reducing your spending, right? So that is a summary of everything we covered. I feel like it went by really fast. Here are some ongoing resources that you can use. Prosper is fantastic. I mentioned I write for them, and they have a really high standard in terms of the information that writers like me can share. So if you go to their blog and you're reading their financial advice articles, know that I am held to a high standard, and every fact that I share has to be sourced by a source that is less than a year old. It's a much higher standard than some of the other folks I write for. So it's a great place to go. You can also come to my website. You can send me a message, or if you want to connect on LinkedIn, you can send me a message there. I think my Instagram handle is in my little background here too. I'm always happy if you've just got a quick question you want to shoot over. If you're looking for other resources online, I highly recommend going to .gov or .edu websites. You can also go to, go to the source if you're looking for credit information. So you might go to like myfico.com. Know that they do sell products on FICO. I mentioned earlier, studentaid.ed.gov is where you want to go for information about student loans. And of course, if you're looking for help with credit counseling, you can get free or low cost support if you go to nfcc.org and you sign up to meet with one of their credit counselors. That is everything from my end. We have a minute here. I think a few more questions came in. I can stay on a little bit longer just to get through some of those questions. Maybe we'll do like an extra 5 minutes. Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, we do have a few more questions that we can try to quickly run through. So
Okay.
the first one is from Phyllis. It is, what if you've gotten ahead on your mortgage payments by using biweekly drafts and you are 10 years into your mortgage? Should you try to put more towards the principal and escrow?
Great question. So what you're saying, Phyllis, just to make sure I'm getting it right, is that you're paying more than your minimum payment each month so that you can pay off your loan faster, which is great. Highly recommend. You're saying, I think the question is, should she continue doing that?
Yeah, I think like currently she's doing biweekly drafts.
Mhm.
I think it's the question of like, should she accelerate that rate or stay where she's at, or potentially think about toning it down and using the money other places?
Great. What I would say is it really depends on where you're at. So if you want to, if you didn't catch it all in one go, if you want to go back and look through the presentation when you get it, is look at which level am I at. If you have paid off all of your high interest debt already and you've got enough savings for emergencies and for, upcoming short-term expenses, by all means, throw the extra money into those mortgage payments because you are going to save yourself a lot of money on interest charges. At the same time, you do, if you're in the satisfaction phase where you're focusing on setting yourself up for retirement, you do still want to be contributing to retirement, assuming that your interest rate on the mortgage is what we would call low interest. So below, 6% or below, right? If it's higher than that, then I would prioritize more paying off the mortgage a little bit faster. But you want to think about splitting the funds between retirement and your extra mortgage payments. It's a great way to use your surplus.
And we have another mortgage related question.
Mhm.
Would you be able to use a 401k savings for a house down payment? Would you pay penalties if you do so?
Good question. I don't want to get too in depth with that one because it is ultimately a tax question. But if you go to irs.gov, you'll see some information there. There are circumstances where you can make an early withdrawal for, I believe it's for your purchase of your first home. So I would recommend if you're seriously thinking about that, go there and look to see which penalties you might be eligible to have waived. But you still want to think about the fact that there may be multiple different penalties that apply. And so you want to think about whether or not that's really worth it.
Right. And I think as of right now, we have one last question that we'll wrap up
Okay.
with. And it's, what do you think of debt settlement companies who instruct their clients to stop payments on their credit cards and then they settle the debt for a lower percentage?
Oh, great question. I got to filter my response a little bit because I have very strong feelings about debt settlement companies. I hate them. I'm not a fan of debt settlement at all. There are a couple of other great ways to go. Debt settlement, they can't guarantee any positive outcomes. So gosh, I wish I could get more into this, but we don't have enough time. So I'm just going to give you the high overview. What I would recommend if you are already working with a debt settlement company is look to see if you can cancel your services with them, check your contract, and try to get back as much of your money as possible. What you want to do instead of hiring a debt settlement company is you can do what they do for you on your own with no cost. You can reach out to your creditors. You can reach out to, it's really more for debt collections. You can reach out to those collectors and offer them a settlement and negotiate. There's good resources about it online. You can look for articles that I've written about how to do this. But you can do it on your own without paying those fees, and you're far less likely to get sued or destroy your credit scores. Another option is you can reach out to nfcc.org. They have a couple of member agencies that provide a nonprofit alternative to debt settlement. One of them is In Charge Debt Solutions. I write for them as well. Just, disclaimer. But they offer a nonprofit debt settlement option where you're actually guaranteed upfront that once you complete a payment plan, I believe it's a 3-year payment plan, that you're going to have somewhere around 40 to 50% of your remaining debt forgiven. And they can also reduce your interest rate. So for-profit debt settlement, one of those industries that I always recommend staying away from. Yeah. Any final question there?
I think that is it. So
Okay.
thank you again, Sarah, for sharing such practical tips on how everyone can level up their finances. We hope that everyone on the call found these valuable.